It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast, episode 38.5. And yes, that is an odd numbering system, but we've decided to do a bonus episode because, one, there's a ton of news out there that's happened since we recorded our Christmas episode, so this will actually be released before that. But before we get started, this is the Pro Wrestling History Podcast dedicated to professional wrestling history from 1870 to 1920, although sometimes we'll range up into the 1930s, and today we're going to range up a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. But joining me for this episode will be my cousin Dan, so we are two sermons short from our last podcast.
Yes, we are.
Which you won't hear till Christmas Day. And I hope you enjoyed that episode a lot more than I did, because that was like herding cats. Temperamental cats that did not want to be herded.
Plus, you know, we had to put in the extra boom mics and the extra soundboards, and boy, I tell you what.
Yeah, and I had to do a lot more editing with both of them there cursing, but hopefully we won't have to do any of that this week. So before we get too much into some of the things that we want to talk about, I did want to give an update. I had really hoped to have the book on the early career of Ed Strangler Lewis done by December. I just don't see how that's going to be possible, so I'm thinking January, February is more realistic. I really would like to have it out in January by my birthday on the 21st. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm getting up there. So I'd like to have it out by then, but
he's sneaking up on 39, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it clearly in my rearview mirror. So, but one of the other things I wanted to say, because we're recording this on Monday, November 27th, and you will be hearing this episode on Monday, December 4th, and there will still be 2 days left on a free book giveaway that I'm going to do over that weekend. So, and it's one of my newest books, actually, but I'm not just giving it away out of the goodness of my heart. Part of it is I'm hoping that you will enjoy it, and it will make you want to look at some of the other books that I've written about pro wrestling history. But it also is because I really would like this story to get out. It's a little bit more obscure than some of the other topics I've researched, but I'm going to release the book for free on Amazon for 5 days, and you'll still have a day and a half left if you're hearing this on December 4th. The promotion will be over on December 5th. But Wayfarer in a Foreign Land, Sorokichi Matsuda Wrestles in America, I'm going to make free on Amazon for this weekend, because I really want the story to get out. I found him to be a fascinating person to research, and he was interesting because he comes from a foreign country to learn pro wrestling that he wants to take back to Japan. Mm-hmm. While he's here, he marries a Anglo woman up in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And you would think with the racism of the time and everything that would make him a bad guy, but Matsuda was actually a fan favorite.
You know, well, back in the days, and I don't know about in the 1920s.
No, this was 1880s.
Okay, in the 1880s when Matsuda was wrestling, I don't know if that was still... back in the 40 to 1840s and stuff out on the West Coast, the Oriental races were known as more or less slaves and stuff, and looked down upon. Now had their social, if they climbed the social ladder to then and looked upon more favorably, I'm not sure, but
no, I mean there was still so much racism.
Okay.
In the 1880s. I mean, you're still, 1880s, you're still having Chinese workers on the railroads.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're being lowered with the dynamite.
Yeah.
That's where the term "not a Chinaman's chance" came from, because so many were killed when the dynamite would go off.
That's why. They were basically seen as disposable humans.
Right. It definitely was not any better.
Okay. So, but anyway, he's a fan favorite.
But despite that, he is a fan favorite.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting story about how he became a fan favorite. But one of the things I didn't know about him before I started researching, and I talk about quite a bit, is some of his feats of strength. Mm-hmm. Just like today, there's really no money in bodybuilding, weightlifting, any of that. If you're going to make money at it, you're going to run a gym, you're going to do something else. You're not going to make very much money as a professional.
Correct.
And that's the way it was then, too.
Mm-hmm.
He really had to be a professional wrestler to live.
Mm-hmm.
But had that been a more lucrative profession, he could have been a professional strongman. He routinely defeated professional strongmen who were 100 pounds heavier than him
Mm-hmm.
in lifting contests.
Oh, okay.
Could have very easily been a professional strongman.
Strong, yeah.
And he was 5'4", 5'5".
Yeah.
And between 165 and 180 pounds. When he was kind of chunky, he was about 180.
Yeah.
But most of the time in shape, he was between 168 and 175. So I just find him a fascinating subject. And so I'm going to offer that book for free. And before we get into some of the topics we wanted to talk about, did you want to do any of your plugs for your business?
Well, I tell you what, folks, coming up on, there's just about 3 weeks left till Christmas. I do have a eBay store. It's Red Hawk Mercantile. Go take a look. I've got everything from belt buckles to jigsaw puzzles on there. Prices are very reasonable. I tell you what, if you live in the immediate area, we can save some money on shipping.
Yeah.
So take us a look. Shoot me an email. It's right there on the website. Take a look. See something you like. Pick it up for Christmas. So, and also, I'm in business with my cousin Tam. We have a antique booth in High Ridge at Old Time Finds. It's in the back in the big building, booth 214. Come over and see what we got. We got everything from Tupperware to old coffee cups. So,
all right. So now you've had the commercial part of the
Yes.
program. So now we're going to get into the meat of the matter. So why don't we start with some of the news we've got? So 2 nights ago was Survivor Series War Games, and one of the big surprises was the return of CM Punk to the World Wrestling Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously Paul Levesque is in charge now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that would have never happened under Vince McMahon.
No.
And I have heard people say Tony Khan shot himself in the foot when he terminated CM Punk. Jim Cornette said he shot himself in the groin.
Yeah.
After the pop that he received in Chicago and both the rating and the live event woes that AEW is going through right now,
Mm-hmm.
I would say Tony Khan shot himself in the foot, the groin, the heart, and the head.
Yes.
In one fell swoop. And it's because he failed to manage his company.
Yeah. Well,
He should have never let it get to the point where his biggest star and his EVPs could not coexist together.
I was going to say that's what you have with the Young Bucks, who are executive VPs of the company.
Which, okay, here's where I'm going to... I hope I don't hurt too many people's feelings. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks are executive vice presidents in title only. They have never acted like that.
Yeah.
They are not executive vice presidents. They are Tony's buddies. Cody Rhodes, I'll give him credit.
Yeah.
He acted like an executive vice president.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho, who does not have the title of executive vice president, acts a lot more like an executive vice president than they do. So, but they're a whole course in themselves.
Yeah.
They would get any reputable company sued for some of the nonsense that they pulled.
Oh, yeah.
When he got suspended the first time and they got on TV and were reenacting the supposed fight that happened back then. So that kind of nonsense gets you sued and gets your company shut down.
Exactly.
In the real world. But this is wrestling, and people get away with some of the things that they get away with.
But if I'm Tony...
But it's Tony Khan's fault. It's not the
yeah.
Young Bucks. It's not Kenny Omega. It's not CM Punk. It's Tony Khan's fault. He did not intercede in this. He should have addressed these issues as soon as they come up.
Mm-hmm.
Hangman Page should have been suspended for going into business
for himself
during that interview.
Yeah.
The first time they had the thing between the executive vice president and CM Punk, he should have sat them all down and told, this is my company, I'm paying all of you, you're all going to get along, or some of you ain't going to be here.
Exactly.
Instead, he let it fester, and the executive vice presidents were just bound and determined they were going to get rid of CM Punk.
Yeah.
Well, you succeeded, but now the one person. So CM Punk comes out there. You heard the pop.
Yes, exactly.
I told you that WWE put up the video of his return on their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
23 hours after they put that video up, that video had over 3.5 million views.
Yes, it did.
So you may think CM Punk is a cancer and you may hate him, but he has fans, and he brings those fans with. That's why the UFC gave him all that money.
Exactly.
For that, attempt at MMA, which was going to be a long shot at his age and with his background and everything.
But
he did it. Give him credit for that. And I'll be the first to say CM Punk has had issues in other companies too, So most prima donnas you have to manage.
But who hasn't had troubles in their companies?
Right. But you have to manage prima donnas. You have to be able to manage those strong personalities.
Right. And
you can't just sit in your office and do nothing and think, oh, this will all blow over. Because it will never, ever blow over.
Right.
So this lies flat at the feet of Tony Khan.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay for it. If there was truly a wrestling war going over, the war is over.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be a distance number 2, which is a shame. I would love to see AEW get to the same level as WWE because that gives the wrestlers more options.
Exactly.
But this is not going to be even close.
No, because Tony Khan doesn't know what in the crap he's doing.
No, he is a fan.
Exactly.
And he's not surrounded. Right. I know that I would do the same horrible job if I was trying to.
Me too. We couldn't book a wrestling.
We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We know what we like to watch, but we couldn't do that.
No.
So instead of getting people that know how to do it, he has insisted on doing it himself, and this is what you have. They can't draw people to live events. The ratings keep going down, and I just don't see anything that's going to change that.
Right.
And I'm very hopeful for the direction of WWE with Paul Levesque in charge.
One thing I noticed, and this just might be me not really paying attention, but when it seems when AEW has their premium events, their pay-per-views and whatnot, they seem to have these big matches that they want to fill Wembley Stadium, and they want to fill these huge arenas.
You talk about AEW?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Saturday, Survivor Series War Games, they draw 17,000 to the United Center. It's not a huge. They're not in a huge building.
They're not in a. Now they'll go to a 50,000 seat place, 40,000 seat place, maybe for WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's what I said. They'll go. But this is just a regular.
Yeah, that Allstate Center is a 20,000 seat stadium. Yeah. Boy, they made a lot of noise. It was full.
It was full.
You could tell that.
And why don't AEW look to fill more manageable places than trying to fill?
One, I think it's ego. But the other thing you have to look at is, and I don't think they can have those exclusive booking arrangements anymore.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes it's hard to get some of the smaller venues in town that you really like. So this was the death of a lot of territories, and I'll use St. Louis as an example of what I think would have really hurt St. Louis. But in Atlanta, they used to go to the was it the Civic Auditorium or the City Auditorium, whatever it was. Yeah, it was about a 7,000 to 9,000 seat building that they filled every week.
Yeah,
and it wasn't that expensive to run.
Right.
When they were forced, because they closed that, they were forced into the Omni, which was like 20,000 seats.
Yeah.
Well, that would be, you would think, oh, that's great, we got more capacity. But not if you're still only drawing 7,000 to 9,000
exactly,
fans, which is what they were doing. And it's a much more expensive building to run. The TV's not going to look as good. All of that TV, they weren't filming there.
Yeah.
But they did film some stuff there. But anyway, it's not going to look as good. When you go there and you see a bunch of empty seats, you're like, oh, well, this isn't the happening place to be anymore.
Right.
Whereas when you were at the City Auditorium, everything's full. Oh, yeah, this is the place to be.
Yeah, they're packed up to the rafters.
Right. And you would have had the same thing in St. Louis. St. Louis would have had a hard time surviving, even though they were like an every 3-week Friday show. Sam would run one big card a year normally at the arena or the Checker Dome when Ralston Purina owned it, which was about a 20,000 seat building. And I don't think they ever filled the whole 20,000. His retirement card set the attendance record for wrestling, and that was 19,700 something.
Yeah.
Because I was there. Me and my sister were
Yeah,
there.
I was not able to attend that one, and it made me upset.
Yeah, Vicky and I went to that one. But he'd do that once a year. The rest of the time, he was at Kiel, which would draw between 8,000 fans.
And we were there a lot.
Yeah. And he'd fill it up every
Yeah.
3 weeks. Well, Kiel's not as expensive to run as the arena.
Exactly.
And I think that's what did Larry Matisick's promotion in when he ran that Outlaw promotion for a year in 83.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He couldn't use Kiel because that was already booked by Geigel, Geigel and O'Connor, who were the St. Louis owners.
Yeah.
And also, I think Vince had a deal. It wasn't exclusive, but he also
He did.
he had his cards at the Kiel too. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that Larry could get consistently was the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to several of those shows. They never drew probably more than 5,000 fans. So the first thing, there was a big curtain down about half of the arena.
Yeah.
So the ring was pushed more towards like the goal, because you remember that was a rink.
Yeah.
Ice rink. That was the Blues home before they moved to the Savage Center.
Yeah.
It would be kind of pushed towards where like one of the goals would be.
Oh, okay.
So you'd have some floor seats, and then you'd have some seats around. But they probably drew 5,000, and they probably had it set up for 7 to 10. It was about half of the arena.
Yeah.
But you would go there and you would look and you'd see the whole half of the arena was closed off with a curtain.
Yeah.
And you knew it was very expensive to run that.
Yeah.
And he's only drawing 5,000 to 7,000 fans.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what did him in. So I don't know if this is ego. I don't know if they can't get into other places consistently, so they're taking these bigger venues.
Uh-huh.
You would think that there are smaller places in the towns that they could go to.
Yeah.
So if you're drawing 2,000 to 3,000 people, you should be looking for a 2,000 to 3,000 seat.
Like
if you think you might,
Chaffetz.
right? If you think you might get a big crowd pop in or something like that, maybe then you look for a venue that has 4. But you don't want to be any bigger than that. Heck, if you're drawing 2,000 to 3,000 people, you might be able to book it for the pageant.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were in St. Louis. So you need to be looking for places like that. A lot of the early wrestling matches took place in opera houses.
Oh, yeah.
And places like that, because you had the elevated stage. They put the mats down on that, and that's where the wrestlers would wrestle at.
Yeah. That's why I said some of the smaller, there's plenty of small arenas here in St. Louis.
Right. And,
that they could,
and there's got to be plenty around the country.
Yeah.
If you're booking Knoxville and Louisville and Lexington and places like that, there's smaller venues.
Oh,
around,
yeah.
I'm not telling you go to high school gymnasiums. I'm telling you that a lot of wrestling promotions ran high school gymnasiums.
I remember that, yeah. And the armories.
I know that they're a national company. They won't want to be in a high school, but you can find a smaller venue. Like I said, you can find a concert venue. You're going to set up a ring.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you got a stage area, you can set up a ring. You don't have to just be in some huge 20,000 seat auditorium and set it up for 3,000 seats.
I remember. Well,
they got to be taking a bath on those events.
This happened a few years ago. That and now the Staffordshire Inn isn't even standing anymore. But for our St. Louis fans, I attended an Outlaw promotion there.
Okay.
And it was the Staffordshire was on its way out then, but it was still 500 to 1,000 people. South Broadway Athletic Club.
That's a big crowd. Yeah, well, South Broadway Athletic Club and Cronolette Sunday Morning Athletic Club. What could you fit in there? 200 to 300 people?
Yeah, maybe. But every time I went to one of those events, it was full.
Right. Then that's what you want.
Exactly.
You want to fill your venue up.
I mean, and these
because
wrestlers.
What does a full venue look like? Oh, that's the place you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, me and my friend used to comment on the guys that would come out first. He's like, "Oh, this guy's wrestling on the card opener because he's got to get back to his night job at the Denny's fry cooking."
Did you tell them that?
We yelled it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure they appreciated that. Yeah. So what some of these wrestlers put up with, I tell you. But
they deserve it.
if you can't take that, you shouldn't be in the public eye.
Exactly.
If you want to whine about what somebody said about you, first of all, you can say whatever you want about me on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it this week. Mm-hmm. If I don't know you, if I don't have a personal relationship with you, I couldn't care less.
I did have one wrestler interact with me, and he laughed because of what I said. He had his opponent backed up in the corner, and he was doing the Ric Flair knife edge chops on him. Mm-hmm. I was like, dang, dude, you just let yourself get slapped. And the guy didn't know it. He said, yeah, he did get slapped.
Well, at least they got to laugh at it. I'm probably not the guy that got slapped in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
He might not have thought too much of that. Oh, good gracious. Well, should we talk about the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame before we get into the history topic, or should we save that?
I tell you what, who do you think we're going to pee off more people with?
We won't make anybody mad with the history discussion.
Let's do that first then.
All right.
Let's keep them here until they...
Yeah. Warning, you may not agree with our opinions when we talk about the Pro Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, but you might. So,
oh, you mean the Dave Metzler Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I looked through that. I can't take too many issues with the people that he selected for particularly that inaugural class in 1996.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of glaring omissions, which I'm going to talk about there. I kind of wanted to talk about the polling. Now, I had told you initially when I said, I think that there are too many reporters who are fans of independent wrestling. Mm-hmm. But now that I've looked at some of the results, I'm not so sure that I was accurate on that. So,
okay.
We'll save that until we don't want to run everybody off right off the bat. So, the next episode that you'll hear after this one on December 11th will be the completion of the discussions on Stanislaus Zbyszko. And I don't want to really ruin that with what happens, but one of the people that was a main player in that drama in 1925 was a wrestler by the name of Joe Stecher.
Yeah.
And Joe Stecher is one of the greatest American professional wrestlers of all time, a shooter and a hooker. Mm-hmm. During the mid-19-teens, he was on the level of Ed Strangler Lewis and probably could have beaten Frank Gotch.
Yeah.
At one point, Lewis passes him in the teens, I think around 1917. He beats him. They had 3 legitimate wrestling matches that were so boring, people passed out from boredom.
Yeah.
People sleeping in the chairs and that.
Well, heck, when your matches went 3 and 4 hours.
And with no change position.
Exactly.
One of the contests, they just basically stood there tied up for like an hour or two.
Yeah.
And ticked off the mayor of the town that the match was held in.
Uh-huh.
But Lewis wrestled extremely defensively in the first 2 matches because he didn't think he could beat Stecher. Well,
yeah.
I guess I'm putting words into Lewis's brain that he never said.
Yeah.
It appears that he was concerned Stecher was going to beat him because he wrestled extremely defensively.
Gotcha.
In the 3rd match, he didn't wrestle as defensively, and he actually defeated Stecher. Mm-hmm. And then they were never really even after that.
Yeah.
Lewis always had the better of Stecher. Mm-hmm. But when Stecher emerges in 1913, 1914, and then he wins the American Heavyweight Championship in 1915, but is recognized as a world champion by the fans. Mm-hmm. Stecher was a wonder. He was only 19 when he starts wrestling in 1913. Mm-hmm. And when he was in high school, Dr. Benjamin Roller was coming through Nebraska and heard about this kid that was an excellent wrestler, which is Joe Stecher.
He wasn't a Cornhusker, was he?
No, he didn't go to the University of Nebraska. He didn't go to any university that I know of. I think he just went into pro wrestling.
I would have had to change my opinion on him.
Yeah, no. But Stecher, Roller hears about this kid with this fearsome reputation of being a great wrestler. So he decides to go have a friendly little shoot contest with him at the high school.
Yeah.
And almost gets beat by Stecher. And Roller said, this kid's going to be a world champion.
Yeah.
He starts his professional career the next year. And Farmer Burns brings a guy to test him, young Hussein. Mm-hmm. And Stecher, Burns thinks Hussein is going to stretch Stecher, and Stecher stretches Hussein, who has to get disqualified because he was going to have to submit.
Yeah.
And so Burns starts working with the Stecher brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all around 1913, 1914, 1915. And Frank Gotch had retired in April of 1913, but everybody and their brother keeps challenging him. Alex Aberg has challenged him.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Strangler Lewis, who's becoming a name in Kentucky, has challenged Gotch. Everybody keeps coming out of the woodwork challenging Gotch, and Gotch is getting sick of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the man, he was not in his prime anymore.
No.
He's not as good physical shape. He's not a wrestler like he used to be.
And his wife really did not want him to wrestle anymore.
Yeah. It'd be like me challenging Nolan Ryan to a pitching contest right now.
Right.
I'm sure I could probably outpitch him now.
I don't know. That could be a stretch.
My 93-mile-an-hour fastball is pretty unhittable. So. Oh, wait a minute. I just woke up. Sorry.
So, Stecher, because he's already worked with Burns, and Burns believes this kid can shoot and beat anybody if they mess with him, he approaches Gotch, his former pupil, and says, what about a match with Stecher? And you'll put him over. Because they're going to work.
Yeah.
You'll put him over, and then all these challenges will end, and let him mess with the kid. The kid can handle it.
Yeah.
So Gotch likes that idea, because he's sick and tired of all these people challenging him and offering him money to come back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand that he was number one. Everybody wants to be the man.
He's like the retired gunfighter that everybody wants to challenge, because if you beat him, you're the top gun.
Because what did one wrestler say? To be the man,
you got to beat the man.
But you got to remember, Gotch is not in his prime anymore. So
no, Gotch in 1915 was 38.
Yeah.
So, and he wasn't seriously training anymore.
Yeah.
So he has this training match with one of his old training partners, Bobby Manigoff Sr.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Manigoff Jr. would be a world champion in the late 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
This is his dad, Bobby Manigoff Sr.
Okay.
And they're having a training match, and Gotch gets his leg caught up in the mat, kind of a fluke thing, and breaks his ankle.
Ooh.
So that match is off.
Yeah.
So instead, Stecher ends up wrestling Charlie Cutler in the summer of 1915. When the international tournament's going on, they're trying to replace Gotch too.
Cutler doing Cutler things, huh?
Yeah, well, this Cutler, they worked it, but had he tried to shoot with Stecher,
he would have lost.
would have stretched him. Yeah. I have said, and I'll stand by this, at this point in time in Gotch's career, if he had had the training match with Manigoff, and he had wanted to have a contest with Stecher would have beat him.
Okay.
Stecher was in his prime, he was young, and he was hungry.
Gotcha.
And Gotch was none of those things anymore.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe if they had had a contest, Stecher could have beat him.
Yeah.
But they weren't going to have a contest. They were going to work it. Gotch just wanted people to leave him alone.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that.
Yeah. But Stecher does. He wins the American title, but everybody immediately recognizes it as a world championship. And so the world championship is established again.
Oh.
So
I didn't realize
the
that.
world championship, that lineage that they traced, that the NWA took from the National Wrestling Association. The National Wrestling Association also took that lineage themselves.
Because if you remember,
they go back to Gotch and Hackenschmidt and all that, but that's not one title.
Yeah.
But that's what because they just took somebody else's lineage. They trace back to.
Because for a while the states couldn't get straight who the title holder was.
Right.
I mean,
Stecher holds it for 2 years. He loses it to a gentleman named Earl Caddick from Iowa.
Okay.
I think that match was a contest now. I always thought it was a work, but because Mike Chapman believed both of the matches between Stecher and Caddick were a contest. The second one is that one you told me about that we seen on YouTube.
Oh, from 1920 or whatever.
Yeah, that we'll review on another episode.
Okay.
That's the match. The second match.
Yeah.
I still think the second match was a work.
Okay.
But I do believe this first match was probably a contest match.
Okay, well, I tell you what, when I'll rewatch that second match and see if I can see any obvious signs of a work going on. So,
and so Stecher from 1915 to 1970 is considered the world champion.
mm-hmm.
Caddick wins it, and then he wins it back from Caddick in 1920. Now there was some kind of kabuki-ish trading back and forth between Stecher and Zbyszko, Wlodek, not Stanislaus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wlodek, Zbyszko during this time, they all claimed world title reigns, different world titles, because Caddick went into the army and went to World War I not long after he won the world title.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of iced for like 2 years.
Yeah.
So Lewis was involved in that. Lewis, Stecher, and Zbyszko kind of trade the title for the 2 years that he's gone.
Uh-huh.
And then when Caddick comes back, he defeats Zbyszko in what I believe was a work, which sets up the match with Stecher.
Yeah.
Which is the rematch from their 1917 match.
Gotcha.
But the reason I wanted to talk about Stecher, besides the fact that he is involved in the 1925 fiasco,
mm-hmm.
is because Stecher is the bridge between Gotch and Lewis.
Yeah.
He was the world champion in between that period when Gotch retires and then Lewis emerges as the new shooter that nobody can beat.
Right.
And Stecher in his day couldn't be beaten.
Mm-hmm.
If he would have beaten Lewis instead of the other way around,
mm-hmm.
he would be somebody that we would say, well, he was the greatest American. Because when you get down to it, when you get to the greatest American professional wrestler, it always comes down between Gotch and Lewis.
Okay.
It has to be those two guys.
Yeah.
If Stecher had beaten Lewis, Stecher might have the nod to be the top guy.
Yeah.
And the only other person that really ever had a true claim to that was Stanislaus Zbyszko,
okay.
who Gotch would not wrestle again after beating him in 1910, and who Lewis said, and realize Lewis is wrestling him when Zbyszko's in his 40s.
Yeah. And
has been in Europe as a prisoner of war for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
He said the only guy that he thought that could beat him in a contest besides his training partner Toots Mondt
mm-hmm.
is Zbyszko.
Ah.
And because of what Zbyszko did later on to the Gold Dust Trio,
yeah,
why would he still say that to Lou Thez 20 years after that?
Yeah.
If he didn't truly respect Zbyszko and believe that about Zbyszko.
That's true, yeah.
So, to me, the top four guys are always going to be those four guys.
Okay.
And Gotch is an interesting story, and it kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about when it comes to the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
When I went into the project for Gotch versus Hackenschmidt, one of the earlier books that I wrote, George Hackenschmidt had been a hero of mine. He had a fantastic physique, pre-steroids.
Mm-hmm.
I had read his book. I had read his biography. He was a gentleman athlete,
mm-hmm.
brilliant guy, spoke several languages. I thought a lot of George Hackenschmidt. Theodore Roosevelt said if he couldn't be himself, he always wanted to be George Hackenschmidt.
Oh, okay.
Frank Gotch I saw as a dirty wrestler because of some of the things I had read about him, and that opinion was shared by Lou Thez in his book Hooker and some other things.
Yeah.
I did not have near the respect for Gotch because of some of the fouling he did in the bouts with Jenkins and Hackenschmidt as I did Hackenschmidt. But as I researched that book, because you've got to go into it with an open mind, you can't be that biased.
Right, exactly.
As I wrote that book, I had newfound respect for Gotch. And I knew I was wrong. Gotch easily defeated Hackenschmidt both times.
Yeah.
And may have always been able to do that. If they had wrestled when he wanted to wrestle him in 1904, Hackenschmidt probably would have had a better chance.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that he could ever beaten Gotch.
Right.
Gotch, to me, it's him or Lewis as number one. I have my opinion on that, but since I put that in the free booklet I give to everybody, I'll let them read that to see what that opinion is. So I can't see how you can call yourself a historian or a reporter if you are so biased in your views that you would hold people out of a Hall of Fame or put people into a Hall of Fame just because you personally like them.
Right.
So on the reporter side, when I heard that Roman Reigns was number 20.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't get in this year. And if you look at the top 30 where they rank, he ranked 20 out of 30 with the reporters.
Yeah.
He ranked 8 out of 30 with the historians.
Mm-hmm.
4 out of 30 with the active performers, and 7 out of 30 with the retired performers.
Okay.
You may hate the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
You may not like their style of wrestling. There's no way on earth you cannot say that Roman Reigns has not been the biggest star in professional wrestling for the last 6 or 7 years.
Exactly.
And any Hall of Fame for wrestlers, he should be in. Now, I've always had a problem with you putting people in a Hall of Fame when they're still actively the world champion.
Yeah.
I think they should at least be approaching retirement
Right.
or retired before you do that, but they don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, under the rules that they have, I don't see any way that you can hold out.
Right.
So, based on hearing about that, I was very biased about. You know, I just think these reporters are independent wrestling fans and they're letting their biases, but I'm wrong. And I'll tell you why I'm wrong. So Sergeant Slaughter finally got in this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been deserving for a number of years. He was one of the biggest stars in the 1980s.
Right, correct.
Amongst reporters, he ranked number 2 out of 30.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst historians, he ranked 13. Retired performers, he was number 1 out of 30.
Oh, wow.
Active performers, he was ranked 30th out of 30. So maybe we ought to take the ballot away from the active performers.
You know what? Yeah.
Do you know anything about the sport that you're involved in or the exhibition you're involved in?
Exactly. That's horrible.
Yeah. So it's a little bit all over the place when I look at some of these.
Yeah.
So I have to say that my preconceived notions were wrong.
Well, so were mine, actually, because what did I tell you? I said Dave Messler should take the ballots out of the hands of the historians and reporters and give them to the wrestlers and inactive wrestlers.
Right, which I said, well, I don't know about that because Ole Anderson will never get in.
Mm-hmm.
CM Punk might never get in. And that's so CM Punk, you would expect, because on one of the sites I read about, the Young Bucks were on the ballot this year and did not get in.
Thank God.
Which I have to say I'm very surprised about. I mean, a lot of the readers of the Observer are independent wrestling fans and big Buck supporters.
Yeah, but
and on this website that I was reading about some of the stuff today,
the
person that's writing this, who's supposed to be a reporter, says, well, you know, being a fan of the Young Bucks, well, you shouldn't be that big of a fan. You know, or you shouldn't be a reporter. But look at it that, you're just like, nah, I wouldn't do that. So if they're fans of the Young Bucks, they're probably not going to be fans of CM Punk.
Right.
Since he beat him up.
Right.
But reporters, he was 15 out of 30.
Yeah.
Which wasn't bad at all. Historians, he's 25 out of 30. Now, I can't take the piss out of the historians because when you look at the length of his career and everything, maybe he needs to wrestle a few more years. I don't think so. Not under the criteria that they have here.
Right.
Biggest box office star in AEW, going to be a big box office star in WWE. I can't take issue with him being 25th, or I would put him in, but I can't. I have an issue with the historians later, which I'll tell you.
Okay.
17 out of 30 amongst active performers. This is where I see the Ole Anderson effect.
Yeah.
Because CM Punk, I have always enjoyed his matches. I enjoy him as a personality. I've enjoyed listening to his interviews in and out of the ring because he seems to be such a straight shooter. But I don't know CM Punk personally. CM Punk could be a jerk.
Yeah, exactly.
And whether he's a jerk, a nice guy, or somewhere in between, I think he's difficult to get along with sometimes. That seems to be the thing that's followed in whatever company he's been in.
Yeah.
That he can be very acerbic, very to the point.
And you know,
I think that the enemies he's made in the locker room, that could make it very hard for him to get into all of it. Which, if you look at their criteria, he definitely deserves it.
Yeah.
The British Bulldogs. 24th amongst reporters, 16th amongst historians, 24th among active performers, and 16th amongst retired performers. I'm not going to take too much of an issue with it because the Bulldogs were only a team for a couple years.
Yes, they were.
Dynamite Kid went in the inaugural class of 1996.
Uh-huh.
I don't think Davy Boy is in.
Yeah.
So Davy Boy, I would say personally, just like with Greg Valentine, if I was to make in the rules for the Hall of Fame, they would be just right underneath that.
Right.
Because they were never the top heel or baby face. You know, they were always really good upper mid card to main events, but they never carried a company.
No.
But when you look at all of the people they have put in, and we'll talk about who they did put in, I don't think you can argue with Davy Boy being a Hall of Famer.
Right.
With what he's done, and him and Brett selling out Wembley like they did.
Yeah.
You know. So, here is the one. Bobby Davis did not get in. Bobby Davis was Buddy Rogers' manager, the first really prominent manager in pro wrestling, who I think should definitely be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He was 12 for reporters, 9 by the active performers, and 12 by the retired performers. The retired performers being 12 shocks me.
Yeah.
Here's my issue with the historians. He was 10th out of 30 with the historians. I definitely think he should have been above Roman Reigns with the historians.
Well,
he should have been above Los Hermanos Dinamita, who probably will get in eventually. The Briscoe brothers, great tag team, weren't together very long.
Yeah.
That's really, I'm looking at that. Bobby Davis is 10 and Slaughter is 13th among historians. Who are these historians?
I was going to say,
is this Tim Hornbaker, Scott Teal, Scott Cornish?
Right.
Or is this Joe historian?
I think this is the historian that they got out of the back alley for a bottle of Boone's Farm.
Now, this is one you're going to go, huh? But actually, their career, they definitely deserve to be in there as the beauty pair. They were Japanese wrestlers from the 80s. They were huge stars then. Reporters, they were 16. Sato and I can't remember the other.
I was going to say, I remember Judy, but I can't remember the other one's name. 16
for reporters, 6 for historians, 13 for active performers, 2 for retired performers. Can't argue with that one.
No,
and Rocket and Perez finally got in.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a no-brainer. You would never put Perez in by himself.
No, but
with Rocket, they were the biggest stars in New York for 10 years.
I was going to say, they were one of the most prominent tag teams ever.
Yeah, and helped put New York back on the map.
Yeah. So,
who did get in, and then I will talk about who I think are some of the glaring omissions. And then we still got a review to do.
Yeah, we do. Whoa. This is going to be an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, at least. So, pretty good for a bonus episode.
Yeah.
So, who got in? Tomohiro Ishii.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
He's been in.
I know he has. I just like to say his name.
He's been in. Oh, and the one surprise that I have to applaud them for, I'll tell you that one in just a second. Sergeant Slaughter finally got in.
Yeah.
We believe he
Now, don't they have to have 60%?
Yes. And he finally got it.
Yeah.
Blue Panther, Mexican.
I was going to say, he was a luchador, wasn't he? Yeah.
Big star in Mexico. Jack and Jerry Briscoe as a tag team.
I still like Jerry Briscoe better than his brother, though.
Yeah, but he was so overshadowed by his brother.
I know.
The beauty pair of Jackie Sato and Maki Yuta. Antonio Inoki. Antonio Inoki. He's been in for a while.
I was going to say, what?
He went in 96. Forgive me, Antonina Rocca. Who also went in 96. But now they're in as a tag team. Antonina Rocca and Miguel Perez.
Yeah.
And the one that shocked me, but it was such a pleasant shock. George Kidd, who you've probably never heard of. I had not heard of him until I read Adrian Street's biographies. George Kidd was a huge star in the UK. He was a middleweight, I believe. Middleweight or welterweight. Scottish champion. He was Adrian Street's hero when he was a kid.
Oh.
And when he met him, never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
The first time he met him, Kidd was a jerk to him. So when they actually had a match together, he impressed George Kidd so much that George Kidd became his mentor, and he mentored Adrian through a lot and was a huge star. But this is before TV, before all of that. And he got in this year, which I think is a very worthy induction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kudos to the voters. I've been taking issue with some of the things you've done, but kudos for that. That was excellent. And I don't want to get too much into who didn't get in, because there's some I definitely don't believe should be in.
Yeah.
And there's people that have strong feelings that they should be in. Mm-hmm. But I have strong feelings they shouldn't be in.
Right.
So let me tell you people who I think have been skipped and should be in.
Uh-huh.
So, and I looked to make sure that Tom Pax was in. He was.
Yeah.
Because Sam
Muchnick, he had to be in there.
Yeah, he started, well, he didn't start it. His uncle, John Contos, started it. But Contos was only here for like a year or two.
I was going to say, yeah.
Pax built St. Louis into being the wrestling powerhouse.
Yeah.
And Sam built on that. But it was Pax who laid that foundation.
Yeah.
But he's in. But most of the people that I think are egregious misses happen to be promoters.
Uh-huh.
And Roy Welch, to me, is the biggest one. He and his partners, which was not only Goulas, Goulas Welch Enterprise, but Pat Malone, the Green Shadow. They really built Southern wrestling.
Yeah.
And the Southern wrestling that exists today is because of Roy Welch. How you can have a Hall of Fame and not have Roy Welch in there as a wrestler and a promoter and a booker, and he taught Jerry Jarrett booking, one of the best bookers.
Oh, yeah.
How Roy Welch can't be in there is beyond me. Ed McLemore, who started a very successful promotion in Dallas and eventually would sell it to Fritz, or his family sold it to Fritz after he died in the 60s. And Morris Siegel, who was the Houston promoter before Paul Bosch.
Okay.
I think all three of those are glaring omissions in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think all three of them.
Stecker's in, Caddick's in. Caddick is the one that he only had like a 5 to 7 year professional career. Mm-hmm. He left very early. He only wrestled for like a year after the match with Stecher in 20. Mm. By 21 or 22, he was a full-time businessman, and that's what he did for the rest of his life. Yeah. I believe he had car dealerships.
Oh, okay.
Either car dealerships or the oil business. He was in one of the two. But Caddick is in. He was definitely one of the premier.
No, is Johnny Londas in there?
Jim Londas.
John Londas. Jim Londas, yeah.
Yeah. Londas is definitely in. Lewis, Stanislaus Zabisco, all of them are in, as they should be. And I guess that's one of the things that frustrates me when I hear how wrestling has evolved. Mm-hmm. And they put George Kidd in, so I can't take too much umbrage out of any of them.
Yeah.
But you would never, being a baseball fan, say, well, baseball has evolved so much from the dead ball era.
Yeah.
Aren't you impressed that I know that there was a dead ball era?
You know what? Actually, I am, because you're not a baseball fan.
Yeah. I know so little about baseball, but nobody would say baseball has evolved so much that Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and all those guys are meaningless.
Yeah.
And nobody would say football, those leather helmet wearing guys. It's evolved so much that Red Grange and George Hallis and all those guys don't matter. You would never say that.
No. And
but in wrestling, it's like, well, before the independent wrestling craze, this was never that good. So that, no.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for, I'm going to say a name that isn't in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to argue too strongly that he should be. Mm-hmm. But when I see some of the other people, I definitely think it could be an omission. J.H. McLaughlin. You ever heard of J.H. McLaughlin?
Yeah.
Colonel J.H. McLaughlin.
Yeah.
James Hiram McLaughlin. He started wrestling professionally in the 1860s. Mm-hmm. And he is the first American professional wrestler to live entirely off his earnings in the professional wrestling league.
Oh, okay.
Most wrestlers, even up into the early 19 teens and 20s, I think Warren Bockwinkel, Nick Bockwinkel's dad, had a business.
Yeah.
Henry Moses Duffer, the collar and elbow world champion in the 1880s, he was a tailor.
Yeah.
Most of those guys had day jobs. I have a day job I love, so I get to write about the things I want to write about, not the things I have to.
And as back in the 70s, professional athletes weren't making the salary that they
not
make
what they're
now.
making today.
And, some of these guys during the off season were car dealers,
Yeah.
furniture salesmen, stuff like that. It just amazes me. But you're talking about the evolution of, evolving of sports.
So McLaughlin and Doofer
Uh-huh.
and William Muldoon led to Farmer Burns and Evan Strangler Lewis and Tom Jenkins, Frank Gotch being able to be professional wrestlers. And it just built on that. Without those guys, this independent wrestling craze would not have existed.
Yeah, that's true.
I interrupted you. You had a thought there.
Well, that's okay. I was going to go back to, I was going to sneak in a NASCAR reference that.
Oh, sneak a NASCAR reference.
If you tell me.
My grandson's probably going to force me to watch that.
You look back in the 1960s, Richard Petty. Some of these guys that, that are synonymous with racing now, if they didn't do it, you can't say, it's evolved so much that those guys don't matter anymore.
Right.
Petty had a shade of blue named after him.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's just, if the Bobby Allisons and the Richard Pettys and the Dave Marcuses of the world, if they didn't get out there and haul their family car to the track, race it, put the doors back on afterwards, and drive it home.
Right. There would be no NASCAR today.
Yeah.
So nothing is so evolved that the history of it doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly. Oh, I do have one thing after you get through, though.
I think I've ranted about that quite enough. So I want to apologize to the reporters who I just dismissed as independent wrestling fans. I was wrong about that.
One thing that I came across the other day, Matt Bourne, who is who was a good wrestler in his time.
He was
saddled with some
also had some issues here and there.
Yeah, but saddled with some unfortunate gimmicks.
Yes.
One of his most unfortunate gimmicks, I believe, was when he was Big Josh.
Yeah, that was even worse than Doink the Clown. Doink the Clown at least drew a little bit of money.
Well, you know what though? Who in the world thought in WCW to be okay to bring a live bear to the ring?
My guess is Jim Herd. I can't remember when he did that, but I think that was during the Herd administration. I don't think it could have been during Watts.
No, but I was like, who thought it'd be a good idea to let Matt Bourne bring this dancing bear to the ring with all these people? I was like, my God, I would have left the building.
Yeah.
I would have ran. Okay, anyway, go ahead. That just shocked the crap out of me when I found that out.
And I don't want people to think that I hate independent wrestling. CM Punk came from the independents. Samoa Joe came from the independents. My view on independent wrestling is much like my view on AEW. I don't want to watch 5 hours to see two good matches.
Right, exactly.
And my issue with independent wrestling has always been you find a few diamonds and a bunch of coal. And it's because they just, most of the time when you think of independent wrestling, you think of people flying around at 100 miles an hour. But it's like I told you earlier. If you go to a movie, if you go to a sporting event, and from the second it starts, it's 100 miles an hour, and it just keeps moving, and it doesn't drop off, it doesn't build.
Right.
It's just a bunch of action, and you're just like, well, okay, now I'm exhausted, and I don't really know what I just saw.
Right.
Whereas if you have a good movie, they just don't start out in the very beginning going 100 miles an hour, never slowing up.
Right.
It builds to something.
Right.
Then it drops so it can register with the audience what happened. Then it starts building. And eventually you build to a climax of the movie.
Yeah.
Then you have the close, which would take you 5 or 10 minutes tops.
Yeah.
But you've taken them on a ride. It's like being on a roller coaster. You go up with the anticipation, and then it drops. And that's the reason it goes up slowly initially is to build that anticipation. Oh, we're getting ready to drop. Entertainment does the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to slow down enough so that people can register.
Yeah.
WWE does not do that. What they do, for the most part, I'm very hopeful under Paul Levesque this will change.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time what they do is bore you to death because you don't ever see any wrestling on their program. You just see a bunch of comedy vignettes,
Right.
which is terrible comedy. Vince McMahon, his sense of humor was only understood and funny to Vince McMahon.
Uh-huh. So it had to be to produce Fuji Vice.
We had that for years. But there was wrestling back then.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 years, they take most of the wrestling off the wrestling show.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Every once in a while, they'll break out a match, and then you're like, well, I've seen these people wrestle 20 times before. Why do I want to watch this?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the next Bloodline skit?
Yeah.
Or when is the Judgment Day coming out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When's Cody going to come out and give a speech? So they have taken it and taken most of the wrestling out of the wrestling. It really was becoming sports entertainment with very little sports.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful Triple H is going to change that around. But it's not like I think that WWE is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
If I've got to choose between the two to watch, I'm going to watch probably WWE.
Yeah.
If there's a Buddy Matthews match or Malachi Black or somebody I'm remotely interested, yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if I see a MLW match with Jacob Fatu I'm interested in, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've watched Impact Wrestling for years.
Yeah.
And Ring of Honor I was watching before Tony bought it. They do say that that's going to be on YouTube. I might look and see if that's decent or not. But I'm not going to watch a 6 or 7 hour pay-per-view to see two matches that would be good.
Well, you know what I did the other day when Survivor Series came on? I fast-forwarded to the very last match so I could watch Drew McIntyre beat up Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, I just, I want to see the things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not really excited about what they're doing with McIntyre's character, turning him heel, but,
Let's see what happens. I think that could rejuvenate him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he could always turn back face after he's beaten up a few people.
Yeah, absolutely. But, going back to the independent wrestling,
I just don't want people to think, oh, he hates independent wrestling, he doesn't give it a fair chance. No, I've seen plenty of independent wrestling. I watched Young Bucks matches when they were with Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, oh, I hate the Young Bucks, I think their stuff is terrible.
Oh, I do.
I just think they move too fast and they don't let things register.
Yeah.
They do have some talent. Kenny Omega, I saw the early matches with him and Kota Ibushi in Japan in the early 2000s. I had two thoughts about this. Wow, these guys can do some amazing things.
Uh-huh.
And they're both going to be in a wheelchair before they're in their 50s.
Yeah.
And I still hold that that's probably the case. Omega does not move like he used to.
Yeah.
You could tell that Japan style is a hard style.
Yeah, well, Io Sky's not going to be able to walk. She keeps on doing what
she's put
doing.
trash cans on her and jumping off the top of cages.
But, I've been to some wrestling shows here in St. Louis, the MMWA, down at the South Broadway Athletic Club.
Yeah, I used to watch that when they had Giant Assassin and Big Daddy and all that.
Well, like I said, sometimes we go down there because it's $11 to get in. It's not a lot of money. Concessions are cheap. And it's a good 2-hour show.
Yeah.
These guys are never going to be on TV. These guys are probably in their, late teens or late 20s, early 30s. Time's sneaking up on them. But they look like they're having a good time. And they put on a good show for us.
All right.
So I liked
independent wrestling. And you know what that
wrestling.
is? That's independent wrestling.
Yeah, and that's what I like. That's what I like about it. It's independent. And I have, in fact, I'm waiting for to Broadway Athletic Club to, put their schedule out for next year to see what they're going to be doing.
Well, I didn't watch wrestling for. It wasn't quite 10 years. It was probably 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what brought me back was I worked with a wrestling fan, and he recommended to me ROH and NXT.
Ah.
And those two reminded me of the old days of the territories.
Yeah.
Now, I will say we do tend to look back on the 80s with rose-colored glasses because I've watched some of it, and I'm like, this isn't quite as good as I remember. Now, World Class, 83, 84, is as good as I remember it.
Yeah.
Mid-South, I didn't get to see the earlier stuff.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Oh, yeah, it was.
And Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling was pretty good for the most part. But I didn't get to see those back then. And the territories, you and I started watching wrestling during the end of the territory days.
Yeah.
I became a fan in 78 or 79. Mm-hmm. You became a fan in the early 80s. By 86, the war was pretty much over. There were two companies left.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 87. UWF was bought in 87.
And AWA was on its way out.
Yeah.
Because their big draw back then was Stan Hansen versus Jerry the Milkman Milliken.
Yeah, that was a terrible wrestling program.
Yeah, it was.
But, you know, we got, because they were partners with Geigel and O'Connor, we got AWA on Saturday night, and we had, before Crockett bought them, we had that Central States wrestling program for which was god-awful.
Yeah.
So you'd have Central States at 10, and you'd have AWA at 11. Well, AWA for like 6 months had Brody and Crusher Blackwell.
Yeah.
So it actually looked almost decent in comparison to Central States.
Yeah. Well, that's what
that was some bad wrestling.
I remember on Sunday mornings.
We do tend to look at it through rose-colored glasses. It wasn't all great.
UWF, WCCW, and WWF. And then on Saturday nights, it was WCW. Always. Yeah. And then, I tell you what, I used to get so mad at WCW. Their TV time limit. We're going to go until it.
Yeah.
And then something always happens.
There'll always be some brawl right at the end. Tune in next week, folks.
Yeah. And then into Jane Fonda's workout videos or something.
Oh, good Lord.
All right. Well, anyway.
So it wasn't all sunshine, roses, and lollipops. We're not that.
Of course, we're a lot older, too, now. But, you know, I did.
Speak for yourself. I just did a hike that was a half marathon. So.
You did do a 13.1 or 13.3.
6.
Oh, was it 13.6?
13.6.
Yeah, I tell you what.
Now, believe me, my knees paid for the next day or two.
Well, I tell you what.
Why did I do that again?
You're more of a person than I am, because I could never do that.
I've always wanted to conquer that trail.
Mm-hmm.
When I was, I think I told you, when I was doing that hiking merit with the boys, because Trey got the gold medal of achievement. That's like equal to the Eagle Scout, Royal Rangers. When he was doing that, he didn't want to do the swimming or life-saving merit. He wanted to do the hiking. And he would be the only one that ever did the hiking merit. Well, Caleb was talking about getting his GMA too. I said, well, I'll tell you what, we're all going to do it once, because I had plantar fasciitis at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know when it was going to go away, so I said, I'm not going to hike 65 miles now and hike 65 miles 6 months from now.
You guys are going to do it together.
We're going to do it together. And so they were the first two Rangers ever in their group to get the hiking.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was 65 miles, so it was 4 5-mile hikes, 3 10-mile hikes, and a 15-mile hike.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And you could do the 15 over 2 days. So we mapped it out, and we were sampling all the trails around the area.
Yeah.
Cliff Cave Park, did all them. And the one trail, all the rest of them were easy to moderate, moderate to hard. The one trail that was just marked hard was Chubb Trail.
Yeah.
And it's because of that West Tyson side.
Yeah.
Because it goes up to like 1,200 feet from the River Valley floor. And that thing, when I say it goes up, I measured it on my Garmin. 0.7 of a mile straight up.
Woo!
Between mile marker 3 and mile marker 2. Then when you get to mile marker 2, you start going down. And that's what took me a long time. So I made the first 3.5 miles of that hike, because the Lone Elk side's flatter.
Yeah.
And you're going down through the Merrimack River Valley. I did that first, because you only got to come down from the parking lot.
Yeah.
I did that first 3.5 miles in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I did that 6 miles through, because it's an out and back. So you go 3 miles into West Tyson, 3 miles back out.
Yeah.
Doing that 6 miles took me 4 hours.
Woo.
And it was the downs.
Yeah.
Going up, I'd get my thing back. So I was going up, I was doing about 2 mile an hour pace, 2.5 mile an hour pace. Going down, it was taking me 45 minutes an hour going down.
Oh,
because I had to be careful of my footing.
Yeah.
There was leaves and my feet were sliding. And it's all rock and earth and all that.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, it was at 3 o'clock that I got back to that mile marker 3. So I've got 3.5 miles left.
Yeah.
And the parking lot's there, So it's either call you or finish it.
Right.
Because once you get going on that last 3.5 mile, you're running along the Missouri River. So the Merrimack River.
Yeah.
The only way, once you start that 3.5 miles, the only way you're coming out of there is you call the Rangers and they come get you to Kubota. And they ain't going to be happy about having to do that.
No.
So once you do it, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah.
So when I sat down on that rock, I could barely bend my knees. And I was sitting there, I'm like, this is just pain.
Mm-hmm.
Cardio-wise, I'm fine. Muscle-wise, I'm fine. It's just my knees are killing me.
Yeah.
This is just the arthritis pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already got 10 miles done. I got the hardest part behind me.
Well, when you texted me and said that you're down to the last 3 miles or whatever, I was like, he's got it. I don't have to worry about coming to get him now. He's got it.
So I'm like, I'm finishing this thing. So I got up, and it took me an hour and 40 minutes this time because I was still hurting from going through West Tyson. But yeah, I finished at 4:43.
Oh, very good.
Started at 9:10, finished at 4:43. But yeah, 13.6 miles.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you're better.
And now that I've done that, am I going to do it again? I don't think so. But I'll find something else.
You know, my biggest hike ever was up to the top of Tom Sauk Mountain.
That's a hike.
Yeah, but we're talking 20 years ago when I did that, and it was still tough.
Yeah, that's a hike. That's the highest point in the state.
Yeah. Believe me, when I got to the top, I was quite winded. But I made it.
Yeah.
But I probably couldn't make it now. I wouldn't be able to. It's either my knees or my lungs again.
Well, I don't think I'm going to do that again. I conquered the trail. I don't need to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll come up with something else.
There you go. Yeah. So, should we get to our review?
Yeah, I think we should. So this is available on YouTube. And remember, you can always go find the links for the show notes at kinzermanjr.com/episode. I guess this is going to be episode 38.5.
38.5, yeah. This is a bonus episode. It's a 0.5 one. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be 38.5. You can get the show notes there. And this is Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling in the summer of 1983. It's before their more famous dog collar match.
This is probably what led up to the dog collar match.
It was part of that series.
Because, well, let me just go ahead and throw it out there. There was no wrestling in this match.
Yeah, it was lots of punching, lots of kicking, lots of choking. This was just the old Pier 6 brawl, Donnybrook. There was almost no wrestling in this whole match. In fact, do you remember a hold?
I think Greg Valentine did he dropped Piper on his stomach or crossed his knee.
That's right. He did a stomach breaker. Mm-hmm. I think that was the only move in the whole match.
I think so, yeah.
The rest of it was punching, forearms, kicks, and I will say the little rope-a-dope in the corner, that was a little bit of exposure,
yeah.
But for the most part, it was an interesting, intense, fast-paced match.
That was one of those things that went 100 miles an hour from the start. And for the 10, 20 minutes we watch is on, you're just holding your breath.
Yep.
Because they were,
But it registered.
It did register. Yes, it did. Because
when they hammered him with the forearms and knocked him back to the ropes, Piper didn't immediately come back with something, He sold, Valentine sold.
Yeah, they did.
They let things register for the fans.
And they would slow it down a little bit to milk it.
Yeah.
Which, as you pointed out, they don't do that anymore these days.
And they didn't start at 100 miles an hour because you remember Valentine did the old heel jumping out of the ring.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was like putting his hands up and begging mercy.
That was like the first minute or two. But then when him and Piper got into it, That was...
And it was impressive to see a young Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people probably...
And a young Greg Valentine, too.
Because a lot of people probably remember Valentine and Piper from their WWE days.
Yeah.
But, God, I remember seeing Piper on Georgia up there with Gordon Soley.
Yep.
doing.
I don't know if you remember this. I used to love to go down to Grandma's because they got cable in Scott City in 1979.
Yes, they did.
We got cable in St. Louis City in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandma had WTVS, so you go down there, you could watch Georgia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The 6:05 on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
She really didn't care.
She didn't care, no. If I asked her early on, she normally said, "Yeah, just remind me when it comes on."
Yeah. Well, she was usually too busy dealing with the adults, and
she always liked, but I because I never got into anything, and I didn't mind going to the antique stores with her, which she really liked. Mm-hmm. So we'd go to the antique stores, we'd go get something to eat, and then we'd be back in time for me to watch the wrestling.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember that. That was good times.
You went to the antique stores with Grandma?
Yep.
Man, we always went to the Orchard.
No, we always went to the antique stores because I love books. So I'd go into the book section. I'd be looking at books.
Yeah.
And I never was like, "Grandma, are we leaving yet? Grandma, are we leaving yet?" Because I just go look at the book section. She'd come get me and say, "Hey, I'm ready to go now." So, yeah.
You know, we always go to Diebels down there in Benton, or we went up to Jackson to Pioneer Orchard.
You know where she used to like to take me to was that Chaffee Dinner Theater.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the all-you-can-eat buffet in Chaffee.
Yes.
Because when I got older, she was like, "Boy, you could put away a lot of food." I was like, "Yeah, it's deceptive, Grandma." I work out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
My favorite story of all time, though, is we are kids in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 160, 170 pounds.
Yeah.
You are 250 pounds.
Yeah.
And Grandpa took us to the buffet on the way down to the lake. And
he's going like, fishing.
He's like,
"Yeah,
I got Dan here with me today. I'm going to get my money's worth here at the buffet." And I out-ate you. And Grandpa's like, "Who in the world would have thought you could out-eat Dan?"
Well, I'm coming back with eggs and bacon. Here, you was coming back with a pound of bacon on your plate. I was like, "Damn."
Well, he got his money's worth.
Yeah, he did.
He just didn't realize he was going to get it out of both of us.
You know, that was one thing that was neat that I like enjoying going with your family down to Tishomingo and fish and stuff like that. That was always a good time.
And what would I do? I would drive the boat for Dad and Grandpa, and I would read my wrestling magazines.
Yeah.
I'd take my wrestling magazines with me because I didn't fish. I'd drive them to wherever they want, drop anchor, read my magazines, and then Grandpa would say, "Hey, let's go over to Cove there," or Dad would say, "Hey, let's go over to this cove." Pull the anchor up, drive over to where they wanted, drop it again, go back to read my wrestling magazine. I read all those after mags.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that was all made up stuff back in the day when I was reading it.
Yeah, well, I tell you what.
They made it sound believable even though it was...
Remember, I used to get I'm sure this probably tore Lloyd Zimmerman up. But one of my Christmas presents every year was a subscription to PWI. Remember I had all those PWIs?
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be like, "You want to read these? Because I'm done."
I'm sure that did. Because your dad had the same attitude as my dad. "Why are you watching that fake stuff?" What it was with Dad was a boxing fan.
Oh, yeah.
He loved boxing. Mm-hmm. And to him, boxing, which it is, they don't fix fights. People don't take dives. They fix the judges.
Yeah.
Dad loved boxing. And to him, if you liked wrestling, you believed all that fake stuff. They had you fooled.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it annoyed him. But he wasn't too bad about it. I mean, he took us to the wrestling matches in 1982.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it because it was September, October 82. David Von Erich was wrestling Harley Race for the Missouri State Championship. Mm-hmm. And there are 20,000 people chanting, "Go, David, go. Go." The floor is shaking in the arena.
Uh-huh.
And we look over, and Dad is sitting next to Mom with his head down asleep because he always fell asleep that time of night. I'm like, how on earth could Eddie? It's the most impressive thing I ever saw in my life. Uh-huh. He slept through 20,000 people screaming and stomping, "Go, David, go," that's shaking the building. But Ernest Charles Diaz could sleep anywhere.
Well, remember that Lloyd Zimmerman was good at that, too.
Yeah.
But don't try and turn the channel.
That's where your dad and my dad were different.
Yeah.
I would change the channel, and Dad would pop up and say, "Hey, I was watching that." I said, "No, you weren't. You would go to sleep. Go back to sleep." And he'd go back to sleep. Your dad, if we said that, he'd be like, "Give me my remote. I was not asleep."
Yeah, right.
And 2 seconds later, he'll be back asleep.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Dad never liked any sport except baseball. So if it wasn't baseball, it was Westerns.
Dad didn't like baseball. He supported the Cardinals.
Yeah.
He always drilled that in my head. You had to support the hometown team. That's why we supported the Rams when they came to town.
Yeah.
But Dad loved football. He introduced me to that. That's why the NFL was always in my top 5.
Mm-hmm.
He loved horse racing. I still like horse racing.
Yeah.
I know that's funny from somebody who hates car racing as much as I do.
Well,
but to me, a car is a machine, a horse is an athlete.
Yeah.
And boxing.
Yeah.
Dad introduced me to all 3 of those. I tried to introduce him to MMA.
Mm-hmm.
He liked the striking. He never understood the grappling. He never became a fan because he just couldn't understand the grappling aspect of it.
I was, I was always a Cardinals fan because of Dad. One of my earliest recollections of the Cardinals was the '82 World Series.
Yeah, I remember that. Because...
Dad was not an NFL fan. That was something I picked up on my own. Dad was never an NHL fan. I picked that up on my own.
I wasn't either, and still I really, I hope the Blues win, but, I can't keep up with that puck going all over the place, and,
Yeah.
The fights aren't too bad, but then they go back to playing hockey. And
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Believe it or not, I don't watch NASCAR and racing like I used to. I've kind of fallen out of it, but yeah. So that's but like I said, anytime I turn on regular TV, it's for sports. It's
yeah. Well, I think we have covered the review. I think we've covered the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to cover in this bonus episode before we let everybody go?
No, I tell you what, just everybody. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see you near Christmas time.
Yeah. Well, no, we're going to do one more bonus episode.
Oh, that's right. We're doing the next bonus episode. Yeah, that's right.
So you're going to get an episode on every Monday this month.
Yep.
And then I have been talked into getting the band back together for the New Year's Day episode, since the first Monday in January is going to be New Year's Day. Somebody thought it would be a great idea to get me, Dan, Trey, Caleb back together for I'm trying to get Solomon on the podcast. I have at least one Zimmerman that doesn't drive me crazy. But we're going to get the band back together, and we're going to do another episode with the 4 of us.
Well, we've already
It might be the end of the podcast because two of those that close together might do me in. So
well, we've already tore down who we're going to tear down on that. I won't give away the
So I hope you guys enjoy these episodes much more than I did recording them, because it was like...
Well, I can lock the door on the studio and they can't get in.
Yeah. I always said as a father that I wanted my kids to be independent thinkers. Because I was always encouraged to be an independent thinker.
Yeah.
And stand up for my beliefs. But
And-
my grandfather...
and both of your boys are.
was the most... So is my daughter. My grandfather was the most dominant personality in my life.
Yeah.
And he always encouraged me to speak my mind and disagree with him when I didn't agree with him. And he figured if I disagreed with him, I was wrong, and he didn't mind me being wrong.
Right, yeah.
But
Absolutely.
he always encouraged me to do that. He encouraged my sisters to do that. We all grew up to be independent thinkers. And I said that's what I wanted to give my kids. I wanted them all to be independent thinkers.
Yeah. And
did I succeed beyond my wildest imaginations? You've never met 3 more independent thinkers, not taking lip off of nobody, do things their own way, and just temperamental cats that don't want to be herded, as my 3 kids are.
And I wouldn't know your daughter if she slapped me out in the middle of the parking lot. Because I just don't have any interaction with her. But your boys, like I said, man, those
Katie is very, very busy starting her career right now.
Yeah,
so.
But in your boys, I mean, your boys are getting to be. I'm seeing them just as much as you do, just about.
Yeah.
So they're.
They're nicer to you though.
Well, Wait, just give it time. The new uncle smell will wear off.
So we will get the band back together for the New Year's Day episode. So if the Christmas episode is more than you can take, you may not want to come back till the second week of January. But I'm hoping you at least enjoy it, even though it might have been a trial for some of us to put it together. So,
well, I think that was the longest editing job you ever did. Was on Tax Christmas.
It was. I think my last words on that podcast were, "Oh God."
Hey, but they will get to hear the Happy Happy Christmas song.
They will.
So,
as will all of you. So that might be enough for you to swear off the podcast. So I think we've worn out our welcome, and we've worn out your patience enough for this week. So I think we'll sign off. And any words of wisdom for the listeners?
Well, you better not pout. You better not cry. You better not shout. I'm telling you why. Because if you do, it'll irritate the piss out of Santa, and you won't get none for Christmas.
There you go. Words to live by. So until next week, everybody, take care.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye-bye.